Good evening, Yehuda. You okay?
Evening, good Baruch Hashem, how are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. I haven't seen you in a long time. I see your number, but not you.
Well, better than nothing.
Something, yeah, see your number. Tell me something. Do you get the pictures from Tolly?
Yes. From last night. I'm on WhatsApp now, so I got them all last night. But the article ones are very, very similar.
Yeah, they're very similar. It's similar. They have slightly more here.
Yeah, no, it's all helpful.
Today we're doing Yud. Okay. I hope you all have your head screwed on, because the next 5 lines, only 5 lines. I know it sounds ominous, and I really should start like that. But you know, it's challenging, but it is. That's right. We'll recap. Rabbi holds meaning a wall that can only be seen when you're standing outside, according to Rabbi, is considered a lechi, right? It is considered a wall. Rabbi said, on my own statement, I'm going to challenge it. How am I going to challenge it? From 2 chatzeros. The 2 chatzeros, we'll refer back to the pictures if you don't mind. It is picture number Tzadik Ches. You had it uploaded yesterday. It's a very simple picture, but it's always good to have something in front of you. A big chotzer and a small chotzer, and the wall between the 2 chatzeros fell in. So the halacha is, we have a clear stated halacha, that what's the halacha? You're allowed to carry in the big one, you're not allowed to carry in the small. Yes, now what would the logic be? Oh, Moshe tells, what's the logic that you're allowed to carry in the big one, not in the small one? What's the logic? Without Rabbah, we would say the logic is very good, because in the big one, you see walls, because it's closed off. In the small one, you can't see any walls, because from the small one's perspective, when you're standing in the small one, it looks like it's completely open. So Rabbah says, on my own statement, which I said, that something which is Shavah b'bifnim and b'achutz is a wall, this Mishnah, this halacha seems to contradict it. The Gemara gave an answer, which took inside 3 points. So before the Gemara gave an answer, the Gemara tells us that what is the size of these chatzeros? Anybody know? This is a very important point. What are the size of the chatzeros? 4 and 2. But what's the actual? That's the size of. That's the 10 and 11. That's number 1. The small chotzer is a width of 10 amas. The big chotzer is a width of 11 amas. There's only 1 amma difference between the big and the small. So if you look at this picture, I don't know if this picture is made to scale. It probably almost certainly isn't. The difference is between 10 and 11. That's the whole difference. So how does it work? Why? So Gemara asks a kasha, why are you not allowed to carry in the small chotzer? And the Gemara gave over here a whole complicated answer. Does anybody remember the answer? Why can't you carry in the small chotzer? Why can't you carry in the small chotzer? The Gemara made a kimta, triple a kimta. 1, there's walls coming out. 2, therefore, since there's walls coming out, that's picture static test, but there's walls coming out of it. So therefore, it's even worse than a normal situation where you've got near and bachutz or shavim with them. Here, the small chotzer actually has walls coming out. Second of all, we're talking about a situation where there's no lavud. Why is there no lavud? Because on one side there's 4 tvachim, on the other side there's 2 tvachim, and therefore on one side there's no lavud. And the third thing is that we're going to B'shittas Rebbe, who holds that you have to have a pass, you have to have a panel on both sides. And therefore, if you have all these 3 situations, that is why you're not allowed to carry in the small chotzer. Is that clear? Is that clear? That's what we said yesterday. Is it on? Is it on? It was recorded. Again, we said Rabbi holds Shavim B'fnim v'nim b'achutz is a good wall. So the question is, if that's the case, why can't you carry in the small chotzer? And we gave an answer which is based on 3 levels. Level number 1, we're talking about the kimta, the walls are coming out. Level number 2, we're talking about one side is 4, one side is 2. And we're going b'shita that you need to have a wall on both sides. And over here, on one side is 4 tvachim, so you've got no lavud, so you've got no wall. The Gemara now challenges one question, and the Gemara Maskana says that all these answers are no good. And the question is, why did we choose to talk about a chotzer which is 10 and 11? Why did we choose those numbers? Talk about the Shaila. Why did we choose those numbers? And the Gemara proves from the very fact that we chose those numbers is a raya not like Rabbah. So Gemara, let's see it inside very slowly. Taf Yud Amud Aleph, second line, the last word of the line. That's what we got up to yesterday. Hi, Mai. How does this work? It would be okay if you really held that if you held that a wall which can only be seen on the outside is not a wall, like many of you wanted to say, because logically there's a certain logic to it, because after all, when you're standing in a small chutzah, you don't see a wall. So if you would hold that's not a wall, the Rebbe and Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yossi that says that you have to have 3 tefachim as a panel, that a minimum of 3 tefachim is required to be a panel. And forget about the kimtas of Abzeh and Ravina, which was, one of the kimta was that you talk about the walls are sticking out, the second kimta that's 4 and 2. That is why the one is 10 and one is 11. Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yossi, meaning like this. Going back to the picture, if you've got the ability to see the picture. The picture is as follows. If you hold that a wall on the outside is not a wall, so therefore that is why the Chotzer Ketana is not allowed to carry. Why not allowed to carry? It's got no walls. The walls on the outside, can't see them. The Chotzer Kedela you're allowed to carry. Why are you allowed to carry? It's got walls. How many walls has it got? 2 tiny little walls. If you look at the picture, where the Chotzer Kedela goes to the Chotzer Ketana, it's got 2 small walls. Oh, it's a hekah, but how wide is each one? So we said 10 and 11, split it down the middle. So each one is 3 tefachim. And we're going in the shitta that the minimum panel is 3 tefachim, and that you have to have a minimum of 2 panels. So that is... Yeah, exactly 3 and 3. Would be no good. But that is why it's very good that the Mishnah discussed the case of 10 and 11. The Chazal mentioned such a case because they wanted to tell you that you're not allowed to carry in the small, you are allowed to carry in the big one. So they wanted to show you what's the biggest chiddush that you're allowed to carry in the big one. What's the greatest chiddush when it's only 1 amma bigger? If it's 10 ammas bigger, like the Moshe I once gave, when my garden is 2 meters, his garden is 10 meters, and the panel of 2 meters falls, that's hardly a chiddush that he's allowed to carry in his garden. Why is that hardly a chiddush allowed to carry in his garden? Because most of the garden is closed off, just 1 small panel is missing. Here we chose to tell us the biggest chiddush, where the small one is only 10, the big one is 11, just 1 more, and Afar became you're allowed to carry in the big one. Why allowed to carry in the big one? Because on each side there's 3 tefachim, and 3 tefachim works as a panel, and you need to have 2 panels, so that is the greatest chiddush we could possibly talk about. So then it's very good we talk about 10 and 11. But if we're going to explain like we explained yesterday, the numbers 10 and 11 have no meaning. Why not? Oh, it could be anything. And the more explains in great detail. If you hold that is considered a wall when it's on the inside, and you've got both a kimtas. A kimta number 1 is that there's walls coming out. A kimta number 2 is that on one side is 4 tefachim, one side is 4 tefachim. Then Rebbe can't hold Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi hold? The minimum panel has to be 3 tefachim. If he holds like that, and we said the kimta is that one side is 4, one side is 2, and according to that, you would not even be allowed to carry in the big one either. Why? Because on one side you'd have a wall of 2, on the one side you'd have a wall of 4, which means that on the bigger one, on one side, actually has a panel which is less than 3 tefachim. A panel less than 3 tefachim, according to Rabbi Yossi, is not a panel, which would mean that the gedola would also be forbidden to be carried inside it. That means if you're going to say the kimta of Abzeva and Ravina, that we're talking about where the walls are sticking out, and we made the story that we're talking about with 4 on one side, 2 on the other, and you allow you to carry in the big one. Why do we allow you to carry in the big one? Answer, because we are holding that a panel can be less than 3 tefachim, and a panel can be even 1 tefach. That's how we must hold. Because if you hold that a panel must be 3 tefachim, you won't be allowed to carry in the big one if you are agreeing with the kimta of Abzeh and Ravina. So if that's the case, Mimon Avshoch. B'achasas ve'ilomeli. Why did it have 11? Why do you have to have 11? Mimon Avshoch. Either way. There were two chidushim in this story. You got one big chutz, one small chutz. One chiddush is you're allowed to carry in the big chutz. And one chiddush is you're not allowed to carry in the small chutz. Now we said we'll talk about 10 and 11. The question is, why did we choose that case? So the Gemara now suggests, is it to tell you why you're allowed to carry in the big one? It says, well, for that you would need 10 and 11. You would need 10, and how much should the big one be? Anybody want to say this? And then you can have a l'chaim if you can think of it. How much? Very close. One tefach on each side. So 10 and 2 tefachim. Again, the Gemara says like this. If we agree with a kimta of Zer and Ravina, that we're talking about one's a 4, one's 2, we obviously don't agree with Rav Yossi that you need to have a panel of 3 tefachim for the big one for it to be mutter, because on one side there's no panels, there's only 2. And Alpha became, will allow you to carry the big one. So the reason you're allowed to carry the big one is because a minimal panel also works. So if we wanted to talk about the story where you're allowed to carry in the big one, what would be the minimum if the small one's 10? How much would you need the big one to be? 10 and a bit. 10 with one tefach each side. So what says? Either way, because if you want to say that the big one's mutter, and that's why you wanted the big one to be bigger than the smaller one. So then, but I said, talk about the case where the big one's 10 and 2 tefach, but you've got one tefach panel on each side, and you're happy, and it's good enough. If the reason is we want to choose a case where the small one is asa, lashminon, the mafriki tuva. Tell me a situation where they are much, much, much bigger, and afal pikein, it is asa, and that would be a much, much bigger chiddush. If you want to say that we don't say lavud, because why don't we say lavud over here? Because normally we would say nir b'achutz shom b'fnim would be a wall, but why over here is it not a wall? Anybody remember? Because you had walls going in, and we don't say lavud because on one side it's 4. Tell me a bigger chiddush. Tell me that one is 10 and the other is 20. And therefore, even though on each side you've got 5 amos of panels, you're still not allowed to carry. Why not allowed to carry? Because you've got the wall in the small one, because you've got walls coming out, and therefore you don't have any more mechitzas on the outside. So therefore, the Gemara says from here, it's a raya, it's not a lechi. One says it's a good raya. I'll summarize this again. It is a very complicated thing. I can see, though, that I thought that people will not have it at all. And I must say, I can see people on it. Very briefly, we have a Chazal tell us that if you've got 2 chatzers, small and big, and one breaks into the other, and one is 10 and the next one's 11, you're allowed to carry the big one, you're not allowed to carry the small. So the most like this. If you hold that the walls on the outside are not considered walls, and we don't have the kimta of Abzeu and Avina, that means we don't have the kimta that the walls sticking out, we don't have the kimta of 4 and 2, then we can understand the beauty of the logic of why they spoke about the case of 10 and 11. Why did they speak about that case? Because they wanted to show you a case of 3 and 3. And we're going b'shittas Rabbi Yossi that the minimum panel is 3 tefachim. And therefore we chose the biggest chiddush. The biggest chiddush is that even though the bigger one only has 3 tefachim heker on each side, that was the greatest chiddush we could ever find to tell us that nevertheless you're allowed to carry the big one. But if you hold that that was not the story, but rather that Nir B'Chutz Shom B'Fnim is a wall, and therefore you have to come on to 2 kimtas. One is that the walls are coming out in order that they shouldn't be considered walls. And on the one side is 4, on the other side is 2, that there shouldn't be a din of lobot. So you obviously hold that a panel does not need to be 3 tefachim. A panel could be less than 3 tefachim. In fact, the Rishonim say that if it doesn't need to be 3 tefachim, it can be even less than 1. It could be even a half. And if that's the case, how much bigger does the bigger one need to be than the smaller one for it to be kosher? Much less. They say the one says 10 amas and 2 tefachim is lav dafka. It just means 10 amas and a bit on one side and a bit on the other side. So to be matted the gedolah, you just need 10 amas and a bit. And to answer the small one, if that's the chiddush, talk about the case where the big one's got 10 amas on each side, but you still can't carry in the small one. Why not? Because its wall's coming out. So therefore, that would be a much greater chiddush. The fact that the Chazal spoke about 10 and 11 is a raya that indeed they were speaking specifically because the walls on the outside are not considered walls, And they were trying to tell you the case of 3 and 3 to be matted the Gedolah without the Ketana being mutter. And that was the greatest finish. Says the Gemara like this. Omar Rabbi Yosef, Lishmi Ali Hol Shmaitza. Rabbi Yosef, unfortunately, in his old age became not one. And he forgot a lot of his learning. And sometimes he would say, I've never heard of such a halacha, or I don't agree with such a halacha. And Abaye, who was his Talmud, remembered what he had said before he lost his learning. So Rabbi Yosef one day came up and said, yeah, I'd never heard about this. You, Rabbi Yosef, taught it to us. And this is how you taught it to us. A beam, a post, which continues with the wall of the mavui, as long as it's less than 4 amas, you can use it as a lechi. And you can use up to the inner corner. If it's more than 4 amas or more, not allowed to carry at all because you've got no post. Let's just show the picture. The picture is Kuf Aleph, if you've got it. A very small picture Kuf Aleph, but you've got a lechi that continues the wall of the mavui. So what happened was, you've got, said Rabbi Yosef that he heard such a halacha. Is this lechi good? What would you say? Is this lechi good, which is Moshe Panish Mavui? Oh, where can't you see it? But outside you can. Right. You kept arguing that yesterday and the day before. No, because when you come into the mavui, you will see it. When you come into the mavui, it doesn't matter. You're carrying inside, you're not carrying outside. The outside is right. We'll argue about it again another time, not now, because we've got a very good thing. The point is like this, again, you should have answered me, it's a machloikas. That's what you should have answered. Usually safe, unfortunately, when you say machloikas. Again, but you add, if it's 4 amas, then it's no good. Why if it's 4 amas is it no good? Because then it's considered the whole wall of a mavui. A whole wall of a mavui, that needs its own lechi. So Rabbi Yosef heard this halacha. Yes. Oh, so again, let's get it clear. You've got a lechi which continues on the wall of the mavui. So up to 4 amas, it's okay. You can only use up to the lechi, no more. If it's more than 4 amas, you can't use it at all. And Rabbi Yosef said, "Va'at amos lon aloh." You said to us, "Shema minot tras." From this one statement, I can learn 3 halachas. Shema minot benechim also. You're not allowed to carry between the lechi. Why? Because it says you're only allowed to carry up to the first corner, the first beginning of the lechi. Shema minot meshech mavui ba'arba. What? Beginning of that wall, beginning of that pan. That the length of the wall of a mavui is 4 amas. That's why you said up to 4 amas it's okay. Once it's 4 amas, it's considered the wall of a mavui, and if it's not lechi. It is a lechi. Why? Because if it's less than 4 amas, you can use it. Even though Moshe keeps telling you that it's no good, the Gemara over here says you are allowed to use it. He said, "Right, it's good a lechi." So the Gemara says, it is a good lechi. A few minutes ago, we worked out that whole complicated brisa that tells us a chotzer ketana and a chotzer gedolah, one's 10 and one's 11. The whole purpose of talking about 10 and 11 was only because you hold that shavim b'mifnim b'achutz is not a wall, and therefore we talk about there's 3 tvachim on each side, and that was the beauty of the chiddush, because that was the chiddush that it's the minimum amount. The big one is mutter, but the small one is awesome. But if you don't say that, it doesn't work. So you see that there's a brisa against this halacha. How can you say tiyuvta and then a minute later say the halacha? And from the Tony of Chia Kavasi, the Chia on Daf Tessamud base, when he mentioned the brisa about a person who builds a wall in a crooked way, where you can only see from the outside, a post is good. So therefore you see that near Bachut Shom Miflim is considered. We'll finish a little bit with this. We'll start a new topic. If you've got an entrance way to a mavui less than 10 amas, you have to make it small. You don't need to minimize. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, what's the minimum? The Tanakama says you have to have, what's the maximum, I should say. According to Tanakama, the maximum width is 10 amas. Rabbi Yehuda says more than 10. How much? 10, 20, 30, how much? 13 and a third. It comes out, the difference is very minimal. Tanakama says up to 10. He says 13 and a third. The passive voice. Passive voice is a huge topic. I explained briefly here because it's an interesting topic. We'll come back to it. So if you don't have it now, it's not in the world. It's got a picture over here, Kuf base. Passive voice was coming to solve a major problem. Yes, we had it in Shabbos. It was coming to solve a major problem that the Yidden had only in Shabbos. Yes, very good. People going to Yerushalayim would need to drink on the way. A well is a Rishus HaYochid because it's 10 tefachim deep and it's 4 by 4. So you stand by the edge of the well and drink. You're taking from Rishus HaYochid to Rishus HaYochid. So they would say you can make walls, make real walls, and nobody can get to the well. Imagine hundreds of times, like imagine going up to Maron and make a well, and you put a wall around the well. How would you know to get there? So they made the minimum walls. If you look at the picture Kuf base, what you would do is you'd make panels, each one like a reish, 4 panels like a reish, and then even if there would be big gaps in between, the panels look like walls. We imagine as if they're walls. Not a reish. Well, we don't have a square one in Rosh Kodesh. What's a dalet without the end? Okay, a dalet without. Okay. Okay, a dalet without the. Yes, you're right. Yeah, a dalet without the back of the head. A square reish. Oh.
The Gemara says a Greek word.
Sometimes called to one shitta. Okay. So now, what was the maximum distance between the passive voice? Was 13 and a third. So the Gemara understood that Rabbi Yehuda, who says in our Mishnah, you can have, no, he doesn't say it's in our Mishnah. The fact that we said Rabbi Yehuda argues you can do more than 10, up to 13 and a third. So what was it? Kavachim passive voice. My passive voice, there we allow a big color. What's the color? Even though more of it is breach than standing. You nevertheless, you are machmir and no more than 13 hours and a third. You're not allowed to do if it's more breached than standing. That means it makes up a if a passive voice, we were trying to be as makel as possible for the good of the Lerega. We only allow 13 and a third, even though we allow, even if it's majority breach. By Mobu, we don't allow that you should only allow up to 13 and a third. Therefore, the Tanakh says the maximum width of a Mobu's entrance is 10 amos. Yehuda says 13 and a third. The Gemara disagrees. As you can imagine yourself, the logic could be argued about. The Gemara argues in 2 different ways. The Gemara says like this. What? The Kavachim is as follows. Passive voice we allow even if it's more breached than standing. It means even if there's less wall than gaps. By Mobu, we don't allow. So we see that we're being made by passive voice. And even so, we limit it to 13 and a third. Movi, which were machmir, kavachim, we should limit it to 13 and a third. Says Movi, the logic's all around. Passive voice, since you've allowed it to be mutter, even though most is breach, so therefore you can't be making all the way. You've got to be machmir somewhere. So you're allowing it in a case where most of it is breached. So then you're limited to 13 amma. But Movui, where? So I lost the place. Movui, where you don't allow it, and you have to have a wall. So then you can allow more than 13 and a third because like this, by passive voice you're being makul. What are you being makul about? That most of it is not standing. So then you can't be makul all the way. But by Movui, when you've got a proper wall, so maybe you should allow more. Inami. Passive voice, by passive voice, we see that we're being makel. What's the proof of being makel? Because we allow poets will baloimet. Poets means breached, oimet means standing. By passive voice, we allow poets more baloimet. So we see that by passive voice, we're being very lenient. So therefore, movoi kalo kaloi, but movoi not at all. Meaning like this. The whole logic to learn 13 and a third from passive voice can be argued in 2 opposing ways. One way is to say that passive voice is being so makel, so that if you have to be machmir only 13 and a third, but Mobi maybe being makel even more than 13 and a third, or maybe you could allow 20 or 30 hours gaps. Or the other way around. Passive voice, we see that Chazal will makel, so that's how they make a 13 and a third, but maybe my Mobi won't makel at all. The Rishonim Master Kasha, which I thought you might maybe thinking of it. The Tanakh said up to 10 amos. Rabbi Yehuda said more than 10 amos. If you're going to say that by Mavui Kalo Klaloi, that we don't want to be matters so much because only by passive voice was so makel, You have to make something, because if Yehuda says more than 10, the more Yehuda says, Klal Loi, the way the Rashba explains is, we don't know. It means you've got no proof. It doesn't mean Klal Loi, literally, that by Mobi we don't allow anything at all. That's not true. Oh, maybe 11. Because the Tanna Kama himself allowed 10, and Rabbi Yehuda says he allowed more than 10. So you can't say. No, the all is Sued to Rabbanon. Yeah. In terms of this. Okay, so the Gemara Lemaisa, from so far, we do not know what's Rabbi Yehuda's Shitta. We know Tanna Kama's Shitta, the maximum 10 amos. We do not know Rabbi Yehuda's Shitta. Tani Levi, Movu Shuach of Esim Amo. Imagine you've got an entrance of a Movu which is 20 amos. No, it's Konavim Siose Bedayo. You put a stick in the middle and that's enough. That is picture Kuf Gimel. Can you see? You've got a Movu which is a nice wide opening, and a person is lazy, he doesn't want to close off the entrance. So what does he do? Put a stick in the middle, and now you've got two entrances, each one exactly 10 amos. And 10 amos, we said is okay. So, yeah, it's also mutai, because once you put the stick in the entrance way, each entrance is only 10 amos. After that, it's past the entrance. For example, if you've got an entrance of 10 amos, and the movi then widens afterwards, that's okay. So as long as the entrance is 10 amos. Oh, now we're going to discuss that. He learned this Vaisa, and he said that halacha is not like that. It's too much of a kula. And the more explains. Ikadami, now another version, very, very similar, exactly the same. Either Levi said it or Shmuel and name of a Levi, we don't pass it. So what is the measurement? Levi, top of Yudom base. Pass, you have to make a panel 10 tefachim high, b'meshech 4 amos, to the length of 4 amos, and you put it against the length of the movi, a huge panel, which is picture kufdalet. If you look at it, you take a huge panel, 10 tefachim high, 4 amos long, and stick it in the entrance. Oh, why would you do that? Then what?
It makes them much more hot.
No, he's asked a good question. We'll come to it. But what would you say? That puts it 4 amos across, and then you will have, it's 20 amos wide, 4 amos across, you'll have 8 on each side. 8 is less than 10.
That's not the reason why it's a problem. It's because we need it big.
No, but you say you want to wide. The Gemara, no, the Gemara doesn't say that. You see, the Gemara says it's no good. Because when you put 4 across, it's too much gaps. We'll see. Okay. The moment the Gemara says you put it into the Movi, 4 amos in, 10 tvachim high, and then that way, you've got a proper separate entrance. When you put a stick, a lot of people look at it as one entrance. Because they'll say to themselves, you've got a stick, it's not real, it's not 2 separate entrances. When you put a whole big panel there, which is 4 amos deep, and for the first 4 amos when you walk into the Movi, you can't cross over from one entrance to the other. You see it as 2 separate entrances. And therefore that's okay. Oh. Says the Gemara, Inani Kedrav Yehuda. Doma Rav Yehuda. Movi Shurochav 15 amos. And Movi, which is 15 amos. Machik 2 amos. You go to a distance of 2 amos. Loisapas 3 amos. And you make a panel of 3 amos. It's picture Kuf Hey. The just next page. We've got Kuf Hey. Here you've got a picture of somebody who's got a chotz, an entrance of 15 amos. So you move 2 amos away, then you do 3 amos. Now let's just discuss it a tiny bit. Very good. Now if you would put the 3 amos directly next to the wall, why would that not be good? Because you've got 12, that's no good. Puts it in the middle. So that we're going to discuss. What about putting it in the middle? Why not put it in the middle? So, I'm not taking away completely that perhaps the person doesn't even want to put it in the middle, because if he does put it in the middle, he'll lose his ability to put in his, as he said, his car and things like that. But the value was going to challenge us a little bit. But the moment the Gemara says, if you've got 15 amos, put 3, that means miss out 2, put 3, and then you've got 10 and 2, which is okay. So the Gemara says like this. Why do you have to do it like this? Yasa pas amo umechza. You should make a panel of 1.5 amos by the actual corner. Move away 2 amos. Yasa pas amo umechza. Shemami no oimed rubala poets b'shtei ruchos lo yahava oimed. This is more complicated. I'm going to elaborate on the pictures. The picture over here is picture Kufches, where the Gemara suggests that you've got a better system. Have you got the picture Kufches up? Kufches, the picture is as follows. What you've got is you put a panel of 1.5 amas by the wall, miss out 2 amas, and then do 1.5 amas. Now, first of all, what would you gain over the story of the previous one? Why would the woman ask that as a question? What do you gain?
No gap between the wall.
No, but the walls like this. No, I don't understand. No, basically, I haven't explained the question properly. Yehuda came along with a solution. Miss 2 amas, put a panel of 3 amas, and it's okay. I think it's got 5. So the Gemara asks a different solution. Do 1.5, miss out 2, do 1.5. What's the difference? What have you gained? Why is there any difference? What do you gain?
Maybe you have. It's a case where you don't have a piece of.
Oh, getting a panel of 3 amas is much more awkward than getting a panel, 2 panels of 1.5, right? If you're a builder. It's easier. It's easier to do 1.5 twice than to do 3 amas once. So therefore the Gemara says, why can't do it? Answers the Gemara, looking at this picture, what's wrong with it is that when you look at the second panel, not the first one by the corner, but the second one, it is surrounded by gaps. Adding and is surrounded, let's see the Gemara inside now. Shmami no, oimed mubala pots, mishtei ruchos, lo yav oimed. That.
Is that the one we got? Which one's that? 2, 3, and then gap.
What do you say?
Which one's that? Where you've got a gap and a panel and then a gap.
That's you've got a panel, then a gap. No, you've got a panel, gaps, and panel.
1.5 to
1.5 to 1.5. Because you want to include what?
2, 3, and gap. Gap of 2, then.
No, here, what you want to do is you want to include the gap. The halacha is possible by loimed is no good. Everybody agrees that if the breach is bigger, so here the breach is 2 amas. Since the breach is 2 amas, therefore it should be no good. But you've got 1.5 plus 2 plus 1.5. So more suggests that the 2 1.5s together should be more than the 2, and therefore it should be okay. Says the Gemara, obviously we don't include the 2 together, we forbid it. Says the Gemara, Shmami no. When you've got 2 together, creating that's not called oimed, and rather what we say is each panel, look at it, is less than the people next to it. 1.5, then 2, 1.5, then 10. So if it's possible by oimed, therefore it's all falling. There's no love over here, definitely no love. Love is always 3 tefachim. So here we've got no. It's like it's completely breached. A wall which is mostly breached is as if it's completely breached, and over here the majority is breached. So the wall says no lemay melach hamoyim. V'shani ocha the osya avir dahagis v'avir dahagis amavatale. Over here the Gemara says it's worse. Why is it worse? Because over here you've got the 10 amas with the 2 amas, and together they consider the 1.5 amas as if it's not standing at all. And therefore you're left with a wall of as if that panel doesn't exist, and therefore if it was worth 2 it would be okay. If we 2 space 2 then 2, then it would be okay at this stage of the Gemara. But then there's bigger gap, and also then you've lost that you only want to put up a 3. You lost. So the Gemara says like this. Let's do a different solution. V'yaseh pas amo, do an amo white. V'yachik amo, v'yaseh pas amo, v'yachik amo, v'yaseh pas amo. Do 3 of 1, and then do 1 space 1, 1 space 1, and then 1. And that's even easier than doing 1 of 3. Do 3 panels. This picture kuftes, and then what you should do is do 1 space 1, an amo panel, an amo space, an amo panel, an amo space, an amo panel, and then you cannot say that the 10 amas ruins it together with the 2 amas. Because at this stage, well, the Gemara understood the only reason why it gets rid of that panel is because on both sides it was bigger. If you look at the picture of Ches, you got 2 amas on one side, 10 amas on the other, and only 1.5 in the middle. And that one is bigger on both sides. But here, it's not bigger on both sides. Says the Gemara. Oimed Kapots Asa. Later we're going to have a very big shine. What about Oimed Kapots? Everybody agrees. A wall which is majority breached is as if it's completely breached. A wall which is majority standing is as if completely standing. Here we're discussing one which is exactly the same. The whole sugya later. From the fact that we don't allow it, a one miss out one miss out one is a right that Oimed Kapots Asa. Nevertheless, over here it's worse because the big Pesach, which is on the other side, because of the fact, normally we would say it's okay. Having a very big gap on one side makes the fact that over here it's 50-50 no good. In a normal case, 50-50 we were okay. Over here, when you've got a very big gap on the other side, that ruins the 50-50. Very more, one last question. Pas amo mechza. Sorry, v'yachik amo, miss out an amo. V'yasa pas amo mechza, miss out and then do a pan of 1.5. V'yachik amo, v'yasa pas amo mechza. This is picture kufyud. Miss out an amo, do 1.5. Miss out an amo, do 1.5. And here, each one is bigger than the gap which it has. So therefore, over here, it's even better than the story which we had before, where the gap was equal. It means first time the Gemara suggested do 1.5 and the 2 amma gap. The Gemara said that's definitely no good. Then the Gemara went down to 1 amma miss out an amma, 1 amma miss out an amma. Now the Gemara is saying miss out an amma do 1.5, miss out an amma do 1.5. And Ochenami, the Kulai to Churabban, the Gemara understood that this was even harder. Why? Because over here, what will happen is you're going to have to build 2 panels which neither of them are connected to the wall. And indeed, this would be a fine panels. But the Chazal didn't want to. They made it easier for you just to do 1 panel, which is after 2 ammas. So the Gemara says, if you've got a situation of 15 ammas, you have 2 choices. One is miss out 2 ammas and then build a panel of 3, or miss out an amma, do a panel of 1.5, miss out an amma, do a panel of 1.5. Rashi adds, which we should have said earlier, that previously we were talking about a gap not of 15 ammas, but of 20 ammas. So then how do you make a gap of 20 ammas kosher? So Rashi, if you look, it's picture Kuvov going back. Rashi says that the way you have to do it is you have to build on both sides a miss out 2, build 3, have 10, miss out 3, and then build 3 and build 2. Because all this works when you've got 15. When you've got 20, you're going to have 2 panels of 3 at a gap of 2 from the wall, and then in the middle you only have exactly 10, and it's okay. And you won't consider it poets murubal oimit, because till the end of the 3, you've got the majority standing. And then, so you consider that a wall till there, and that's a wall till there. After that, there's a gap of 10 is okay. So again, till the end of the 3, it's omen murubal poets in picture Kufov, and then you've got a gap of 10, and a gap of 10 is okay. Says the Gemara, both got a big chashash. How can you say by 15 ammas, miss out 2, build 3? That's what I liked what you said before, Mish. And sometimes what people do when they have these entrances, 15 ammas wide. So you have a gate going across 10, or entrance, which you only use on a very, very rare occasions. Then you have a panel of 3 and a 2 ammas gap. And the 2 ammas gap becomes the entrance, the pedestrian way. Now, if that becomes the only way to enter the mobile, so then what happens is the 10 ammas is no longer considered a Pesach. What is it considered? A hole in the wall. A hole in the wall is no good with the lechi and the koiva. That means the Gemara said like this. Till now we said that you make a space of 2, build 3, and then you have a space of 10. Says, well, that's not going to work. Why is that not going to work? Because people will use the entranceway of 2. And then what will happen is they will never use the entranceway of 10. And then you'll end up that the entranceway of 10 will not be an entrance. What would it be? It will just be a gap in the wall. And the gap in the wall is no good. So the Lord says, people don't do that. Oh, we'll see in a minute. Let's just see what the Gemara says first. The Gemara says that people don't do that. They don't start giving up on a big entranceway to go to the small one. If you remember, Rami and Rasi talked about a case which was, there's all the pictures over here, but if you remember it, Rami and Rasi, they talked about a mobile where there's a hole, not by the front of the mobile, but by the side of the mobile. And Rami and Rasi said that if the breach is 3 tvachim wide, you're not allowed to, the mobile is possible. A breach of 3 tvachim wide is no good. And why did we say it's no good? Says the Gemara. Because people will use that breach, they'll stop using the entranceway, and an entranceway will just be a gap. The Gemara, why the variance is it? Might be luch, meaning like this. There we're talking about where it's in the side, and this maybe helps you, Moshe. In the side of a mavui, people will sometimes use a narrow entrance rather than a big entrance because it'll save them walking all the way around. But in the front of the mavui, nobody's going to use the small entrance when there's a big entrance there.
You see, especially on Shabbat, you have the front drive of the car gate, the entrance gate. You only open the entrance gate, the car will be coming in and out. You only use it. You only use it.
There's no gate.
If it's open, which one would you use?
Yeah, here we're talking about there's no gate, because if it'd be a gate, there would be a problem. We're talking about when there's no gate.
I would use the one that's closest, more convenient.
Right, but that is when it's on the corner, when the mobile has a breach on the side wall, that's true. But over here, the breach is at the front. At the front, then you're going to use the bigger entrance.
If my front is right
If
here,
you're walking towards a gap there, and a gap there, and a gap there, which one would you go to? You're walking towards it, you're not walking along the street.
No, he's arguing if you're coming from the left-hand side, let's say King's Road would have 2 entrances, one of 10 and one of 2. And you're coming up very new, and you're turning right onto King's, and the first entrance is 2 and the next entrance is 10, you might... Like, more understood that people generally would not do that.
that's like the road goes in.
No, more understood that people don't do that. At the end of the day, they'll keep to that main entrance because it's wide. Now, since we talked a lot about having gaps and spaces, the Gemara is going to talk about a completely separate topic, which is the same thing. No pictures over here. You've got a foldable chair. You know these chairs where you can open them up and then you have a piece of cloth across, right? Deck chairs. And nowadays, except using them as a bathroom, you make a circle hole inside it, and then it's a piece of leather, and then you open it up, and then you've got a hole, and then that's called the oyas. Now, the halacha is that a mace, which is underneath the oil, he spreads tumah. For it to spread tumah, there has to be at least a tefach of roof above. So, for example, if this is less than a tefach by a tefach, I assume. So if this would be on top of me and the mace, outside, let's say I'd go outside and say dead body and put this cup on top of my head, that would not be considered the oil. Why not? Because there's no tefach per tefach. What happens if this chair, it's interesting, I don't think it's exactly how it's possible this chair would be so small. And this chair is a tefach by a tefach.
It's got bars, metal bars, wooden bars.
No, it's got cloth. The cloth.
Not much material. It's not a width of a tefach.
Oh, very good. That's the question. You've got material around, a circle in the middle, and the question is, can you include... That's right.
Wide toilet seat.
But obviously, I have very, very small toilet seats. We'll discuss it another time. Let's get it clear because we're going to get it. Your question is, can you include the circle, which is the hole, with the fabric around to make you a tefach? What? Oh, that's the next Gemara. That's exactly what the Gemara discusses. Tell us, starting the tefach. The leather bathroom seat with the space all together can add it all up to make it a tefach. It is the leather chair of a basic kissing. That's fine to make a picture. It's not very hard to picture it. You've got like a skin. You know, you sometimes buy disposable toilet covers, the toilet seat linings, similar to that. So you've got such a thing which opens up on a frame, and people would carry it around them and they'll sit on it. So now, your question is, can you include the circle with the fabric around? That's the question. It was made out of leather. So this is made out of leather. Can you include it? So it goes like this. The camel. How big is it? Maybe this is complicated. So you need to have your scientific calculator. The camel. Also have dimi oma. It's buying in camel, it's buying in camel, it's buying in 2 fingers width of fabric, 2 fingers of hole, 2 fingers of fabric. like the very small tissue box, so you have to get the tissues are the square ones. Very good. Says the Gemara, Robin came along, slightly different. He said two fingers. He said 1.5, 1.5, and 1 finger. Remember, 1 finger, not 1.5 in the middle. He didn't say 1.5 in the middle. He said 1.5, 1.5, and 1 in the middle. Are you actually arguing? I don't know how this is in it. I know it bothered me. I don't know how they can use that as a battle suit. Okay. The point is,
Primitive design, now they do better ones.
baby for babies. It's, okay. So Mo asks a kasha. He said, "Abaya said to Rav Dimi, mi pligisu, do you argue? What do you argue? First they argued. He said 2, 2, 2. He said 1.5, 1, 1.5. He meant, are you arguing about something fundamental? There are 3 different fingers on your finger for regarding tefach. You've got your thumb, your middle finger, and your small finger. A tefach is 6 of these, 5 of these, and 4 of these. So in fact, when he said 6, 2, 2, 2, he was talking about these, which is exactly a tefach. And that's exactly the amount you need to make tumah spread. So he said, if you got 2 of these, 2 of my small fingers, cloth, leather, then 2 of these, space as a whole, and then 2 of these, leather on the other side, because you always have both sides, like this box, then that's a tefach. The other man that I was talking about, a much bigger finger, thumb. So if he said 1.5 of these, plus 1.5 of these on each side, plus 1 in the middle, which comes to 4. So that is no argument. Both agreeing that a tefach is either 4 fingers, 5 fingers, or 6 fingers. I'm sure which one we're talking about. Okay. Why? Okay, no, they're not arguing. 6 of these, actually, I remember the first time I learned it, I spent time measuring. So it comes out how much wider is your thumb and your small finger? How much times wider? Very good. Oh, you're good at this. 1.5 times, because the 6 of these, 4 of these. So your thumb must be 1.5 times wider than your finger. So go home and measure it and tell me if you. Okay. Says the Gemara. Look, we're talking. Le'ai is an interesting word. It means indeed. Of course, you do argue. You're arguing, but that's what you're arguing about it. That means over here. You've got over here that if you take the first case, 2, 2, and 2, the hole in the middle is as wide as each fabric on each side. Now we need to consider something blocked, a hole covered. You want to have more standing than breached. Now in the first case, you had 2, 2, 2. The breach in the middle is as wide as the one on each side. So what? But if you're really scientific, what you would say is the one next to it is the same as the one next to it. So neither one is considered opposed, and then you've only got 2. Oh, so that's the question. Can you work them together? The man that says 2, 2, and 2 says obviously you can't, because otherwise you've got no tefach, because if you've got no tefach, you've got no tumah. The other man that said 1.5, 1, and 1.5, he has no. You can't have that the breach in the middle is as wide as either side. You have to have that the walls on the side are greater than the breach in the middle. Similar to here. That you have to have that each side of the toilet seat has to be wider than the gap of the toilet seat in order that tumah should be able to spread properly through this area. To be considered a tefach. Very good. Let's say it's having a previous. Maybe one of us will stay with us. Let it talk. It's considered it. If indeed you are not arguing, Yehuda who held that we're talking about small, we're talking about thumbs, which are big, but less of them. What did Yehuda talk about? He was about thumbs. That's why you need 4. You were talking about fingers, you need 6. But if the whole difference was what you were talking about thumbs, and one was talking about thumbs, one was about small fingers. So instead of saying 2, 2, 2, the next one says 1.5, 1, 1.5. What could he have said? 1 1/3, 1 1/3, 1 1/3. Why didn't he say 1 1/3, 1 1/3, 1 1/3? Because that gap would be too big. And once the gap is too big, the fact that you include, like you were saying before, both sides is no good. It doesn't like that. You have to have that each wall has to be bigger than the gap in the middle. I could have said as follows. If I hold that you can include both sides together, then I didn't need to have 2, 2, and 2. Rather, I could have had a case of 5. Again. It's a bit more complicated. You could have had 1 and 2/3 on one side, 1 and 2/3 on the other side, and the middle 2 2/3, which is less than 2 sides, and altogether comes to a tefach. Work it out, Nuwashi. 1 and 2/3 plus 1 and 2/3 is how much? Is 4. 1 and 2/3 comes to 3 and a third. Very good. 3 and a third plus 2 and 2/3 is 6, which is exactly the amount. And eat together with both sides, you've got more than gap in the middle. We're only arguing about Paul's Ka'imed. According to me, Paul's Ka'imed is okay. According to him, Paul's Ka'imed is no good. So therefore, he needed to have 1.5, 1, 1.5. I could have 2, 2, and 2, and it's okay. He was stopping over here, and it's amazing,
We need to break something.
Yeah, it's got a long daf tomorrow, and it's not so hard. Not like today. I thought today would be. It is hard. It is hard. Eiruvin is not.
Even top.
What? Okay, Shkoyach. Andrew, any questions? Yehuda, you okay? Can you hear me, Andrew? Clearly, is a good line. I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the bag. I didn't.
So logged into it.
Well, did that affect the address? No, but if that goes down for a few seconds, it can jump.
Here.
Then you have nothing.
By the way, do you know what you've got done? You put it on high definition, whatever it is, and it's taking much longer to upload.
I know, you should come work for me.
Yeah, I told you.
I'll give it up.
Yeah.